The clock had just struck midnight when Emma stepped out of the university library, the last echoes of her footsteps softly bouncing off the empty campus paths. The crisp autumn air bit at her cheeks, and the wind whispered through the trees, rustling the dried leaves that had long since surrendered to the season. Most students had long gone back to their dorms, but Emma had stayed late, cramming for her finals with a cup of lukewarm coffee and a growing sense of exhaustion. She adjusted her backpack and pulled her coat tighter around her. Normally, she would have taken the main road back to her apartment, where the streetlights and occasional passing car offered some semblance of comfort. But tonight, something nudged her in a different direction. Maybe it was the need for quiet after hours of studying, or the way the moonlight bathed the nearby park in a silvery glow. Whatever the reason, she found herself turning onto the shadowy trail that wound through the university park. The park, during the day, was a favorite spot for students to relax, play frisbee, or read under the towering trees. But at night, it transformed. The shadows grew long and dense, and the familiar took on a slightly eerie hue. Emma walked carefully, the gravel crunching beneath her boots, her eyes scanning the dim path ahead. Halfway through the park, near the old oak tree that stood like a sentinel in the center, a figure emerged from the darkness. Emma halted, her heart leaping into her throat. The person wore a long coat and a hoodie pulled up, obscuring their face. The moment felt surreal, like the beginning of a suspense movie. The figure noticed her pause and slowly raised their hands. "Sorry," the person said, their voice calm and non-threatening. "I didn't mean to scare you." There was something familiar about the voice, something buried deep in her memory. "Jake?" she asked cautiously, taking a tentative step forward. The figure pulled back his hood, revealing a face she hadn't seen in over a decade. It was Jake Thompson, her childhood best friend. The same boy who used to race her down the street on bicycles, who once got attention for throwing water balloons at the summer fair, who had moved away without so much as a proper goodbye. "Emma," he said, stunned. A smile slowly spread across his face. "I was hoping I'd run into someone I knew, but I never expected it to be you." For a moment, the night was quiet again, the kind of quiet that made time feel suspended. Emma could hardly believe it. The years had changed him. His features were more defined, his voice deeper, but the same spark of mischief lived in his eyes. "What are you doing here?" she asked, still dazed by the coincidence. Jake looked down, the smile fading into a more thoughtful expression. "I'm back in town for my grandma's funeral," he said quietly. "She passed away last week. I stopped by the park to remember the times we used to play here." "I'm so sorry, Jake," Emma said sincerely. "I remember how close you were with her." "Yeah," he said, nodding. "She was like a second mom." They stood in silence for a few moments, the soft rustle of leaves filling the space between them. Emma glanced up at the oak tree, its massive branches stretching out like a protective canopy. They used to sit beneath it for hours, imagining wild adventures and making pinky promises to stay friends forever. "I almost didn't come this way," Emma said. "I never take the park route at night." Jake chuckled. "Neither do I. Guess we both needed a little nostalgia tonight." They sat down on a bench near the tree, the cold metal barely a bother as the warmth of the moment enveloped them. They talked about school, careers, family, and the strange way life had twisted and turned since they last saw each other. Emma was studying biology, dreaming of becoming a pediatrician. Jake had joined the Air Force, traveled to places he never imagined, and had recently returned to civilian life, unsure of his next step. Time slipped by unnoticed. The park, once cloaked in solitude, began to feel like a private sanctuary. They laughed over shared memories, like the time they tried to build a treehouse and ended up with a pile of crooked boards, or the infamous prank war that left their parents exasperated and secretly amused. "I miss this," Jake said, gazing up at the stars through the breaks in the clouds. "Me too," Emma replied. "Life just moved on so fast." Jake turned to her. "Why didn't we stay in touch?" Emma shrugged. "I don't know. We were kids. Then you moved, and it was like we lived on different planets." He nodded slowly. "I always regretted not saying goodbye." They sat in silence again, but it was a comfortable one. The kind that only old friends can share. The kind where words weren't always necessary. Eventually, the cold began to creep in again, and Emma checked the time. It was nearly 2 a.m. "I should get going," she said reluctantly. "I've got an exam in the morning." Jake stood with her. "Let me walk you back." They strolled together through the quiet park, the tension and awkwardness of the initial encounter long gone. By the time they reached her apartment building, the first hints of dawn were coloring the sky. Jake turned to her at the steps. "Can I see you again before I leave?" Emma smiled. "I'd like that." They exchanged numbers, and with a final hug that felt like the closing of one chapter and the beginning of another, he turned and walked into the fading night. What had begun as an ordinary, even forgettable night had turned into something extraordinary. A surprising moment, an unexpected encounter that reminded Emma of the beauty of the past and the possibilities of the future. And as she finally drifted off to sleep, she couldn't help but wonder what other surprises life might have waiting just around the corner.